Okay, stop. Before you say a single word, I need you to think about the last 10 seconds of Shutter Island. You know the ones. Andrew Laeddis, U.S. Marshal Teddy Daniels, the man we've spent 2 hours watching unravel, is sitting on the hospital steps in the morning sun. Dr. Cawley is watching him. Chuck, or rather Dr. Sheehan, crouches down beside him. And Andrew looks up, perfectly calm, and says, "Which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man?" And then he walks toward the lighthouse, toward the lobotomy, willingly. Martin Scorsese, you absolute genius. Because here's the thing, that line breaks the entire film open like a cracked egg. Is he relapsing? Is Teddy Daniels back? Or, and this is the question that kept me awake at 3 in the morning with a conspiracy board and too much coffee, what if Andrew Laeddis said those words in full, conscious awareness of who he really was? What if he remembered everything and chose the lobotomy on purpose? Yes, we're going there. Welcome to MiniFlicks, where we don't just watch movies, we detonate them and rebuild them from the wreckage. I'm your host, and today we are cracking open one of the most psychologically dense thrillers in modern cinema history. Dennis Lehane publishes Shutter Island, 2010. Scorsese adapts it with Leonardo DiCaprio at arguably the peak of his pre-Oscar, I Will Ruin You Emotionally career. Box office? $294 million worldwide. Cultural impact? Every single person who watched it immediately rewound the last 10 minutes and watched them again, twice. The film is a masterpiece of unreliable narration. Every single visual cue, every odd line of dialogue, every slightly too bright hallucination, it was all pointing at the truth the whole time. Andrew Laeddis drowned his own children. His wife Dolores killed them. He killed her. He built an elaborate fantasy, U.S. Marshal Teddy Daniels investigating a missing patient, because his mind literally could not survive the alternative. Dr. Cawley's entire plan? Give Andrew one last chance to confront reality through an elaborate role play. Let him be Teddy. Let him investigate. Let him follow the trail all the way to the lighthouse. And if he breaks through and remembers the truth, maybe they can pull him back. And here's where the film tells us, in that impossibly ambiguous final line, that it worked. Or did it? Because here is your point of divergence. Here is the single moment where our alternate timeline splits from the original. Andrew Laeddis wakes up on those hospital steps. He says that line to Sheehan, and he is completely, lucidly, devastatingly sane. He knows who he is. He knows what he did. He knows the role play worked. He is not relapsing. And he chooses the lobotomy anyway. Not because the madness won, because the truth is worse. That is our what if. Not a different choice made in ignorance. A different choice made in full knowledge. What happens to Ashcliff Hospital, to Dr. Cawley, to Dr. Sheehan, and to the entire covert government program operating on that island, when the one patient who was supposed to be saved consciously decides he would rather be destroyed? Strap in. This gets dark. Alright, to understand why Andrew's conscious choice to embrace the lobotomy is not only psychologically plausible, but arguably inevitable, we need to go back into the canon and understand exactly what kind of man Andrew Laeddis actually is. And I mean the real Andrew Laeddis, not Teddy Daniels, the hard-boiled federal marshal with a dead wife and a cigarette. Andrew Laeddis, World War II veteran, combat survivor, Dachau liberator. Let's talk about that for a second, because the film doesn't dwell on it long enough. Andrew Laeddis participated in the liberation of Dachau concentration camp. The film shows us brief, scorched flashes of this. Bodies in the snow, Andrew mechanically lowering his gun at a surrendering German officer, then raising it again and executing him. This is not a throwaway detail. This is load-bearing character architecture. Andrew Laeddis came home from the war already fractured, already intimate with atrocity, already a man who had looked into the absolute worst of what human beings do to each other, and had not blinked. He self-medicated with alcohol. He was, by every account embedded in the film's subtext, a man living on a fault line long before Dolores ever struck the match. Now here's the critical psychology. Andrew's fantasy, the Teddy Daniels persona, was not built purely from grief. It was built from a very specific kind of shame. The shame of a man who considers himself a protector, a soldier, a marshal. Someone whose entire identity is structured around the idea that he keeps people safe, and who then failed to keep the three people who mattered most alive. His mind didn't just erase the trauma. It recast him as a hero, actively searching for the missing. Think about that construction. Teddy Daniels is not hiding. Teddy Daniels is hunting. Andrew's subconscious didn't let him disappear into numbness. It gave him a mission, because a man like Andrew Laeddis cannot exist without a mission. So, Dr. Cawley's roleplay works. Andrew reaches the lighthouse. He climbs those stairs. He sits across from Cawley, and it all comes flooding back. The lake, the children floating face down, Dolores standing in the water, his hands around the gun. All of it. In the original film, the interpretation most viewers accept is that Andrew cannot sustain this clarity, that the trauma is simply too catastrophic, and Teddy Daniels begins to reassert himself. That final line is a goodbye from a sane man who knows the madness is already pulling him back under. But our timeline diverges right here. What if the clarity holds? What if Andrew Laeddis is simply, and I want you to feel the full weight of this word, stronger than Cawley anticipated? He sits on those steps and he does the maths. He is Andrew Laeddis. He is 42 years old. He is on an island psychiatric facility that, as Teddy Daniels, he is now confirmed, is conducting illegal neurological experiments on patients under the cover of treatment. He has murdered his wife. He has, through catastrophic inaction, lost his children. He will spend the rest of his natural life on Ashcliff, under observation, as patient 67. And here is the specific thought that tips the scales. The thought that is perfectly, horribly consistent with everything the film has built about this man. He does not believe he deserves to be saved. This is not madness. This is not relapse. This is a veteran who has already executed a surrendering man in the snow, who watched children drown and did not stop it in time, making a rational, moral calculation. A lobotomy means he will no longer be Andrew Laeddis. He will no longer be the man who did those things. In his own private moral universe, a universe built in the ruins of Dachau, that is not a punishment. That is an exit. Now, here is where the domino effect begins. Because Andrew saying those words to Sheehan with full sanity is not a quiet moment. It is a catastrophe for every single person on that island. Domino 1. Dr. Sheehan knows. In the original film, Dr. Sheehan, crouched beside Andrew on those steps, interprets the final line as a relapse and exchanges a devastated look with Cawley. They proceed with the lobotomy, believing they've failed. But in our timeline, Andrew looks Sheehan directly in the eyes. And Sheehan, who has spent months embedded with this man as Chuck All, who understands Andrew's psychology more intimately than anyone alive, recognizes immediately that Andrew is present. Lucid. Deliberate. Sheehan stands up, and instead of giving Cawley the signal to proceed, he pauses, because Sheehan now has a problem that has nothing to do with Andrew Laeddis. He has a problem with what he knows about Ashcliff. During the roleplay, Andrew as Teddy did in fact uncover evidence of the covert program, the experiments, the Ward C operations, the government's involvement in using this island as a testing ground for psychosurgical techniques under the cover of the Cold War. The film heavily implies this is real, not delusion. Dr. Naring, the Warden's barely concealed hostility, the files that don't add up. If Andrew is genuinely sane, if he has processed all of this with a clear mind, then Andrew Laeddis is not just a patient who chose a lobotomy. Andrew Laeddis is a witness, a conscious, competent, legally cognizant witness to criminal medical experiments, who is about to have those memories surgically removed. Sheehan is not a monster. He signed on to help Andrew, not to destroy evidence walking around inside a man's skull. And now he is standing between a sane man walking toward a lighthouse and a conspiracy he has been professionally complicit in. Domino 2. Cawley's entire moral framework collapses. Dr. John Cawley's characterization in the film is specific and important. He is not a villain. He is a man who genuinely believes in his therapeutic philosophy, that a patient should be given every possible chance at recovery before the surgical option is considered. The roleplay was his last attempt to save Andrew. He proposed it to the board at enormous professional risk. If Sheehan pulls him aside and says, he's not relapsing, he's choosing this, he knows exactly what he's doing, Cawley's response is not going to be relief. It is going to be horror. Because Cawley now faces an ethical impossibility. If Andrew is competent, then proceeding with the lobotomy without attempting further intervention is not treatment. It is complicity in a patient's self-destruction. Everything Cawley has staked his career on, his opposition to punitive psychosurgery, his belief in the dignity of the patient, demands he stop this. But stopping it means re-engaging with Andrew, and re-engaging with Andrew means Andrew talks. Andrew, with his intact memory and his veteran stubbornness and his nothing-left-to-lose clarity, starts talking about Ward C. And the board, the government officials, the warden, they are not going to allow that. Domino 3, The Island, becomes a pressure cooker. The Warden of Ashcliffe is one of the film's most unsettling figures, precisely because he barely speaks. He doesn't need to. He represents institutional violence, the idea that the building itself is a weapon. He made that speech to Teddy on the cliff about violence being all that God or nature ever truly rewards. When word reaches the warden that patient 67 has been assessed as currently competent by two of the facility's own psychiatrists, and that Cawley is arguing for a halt to the procedure, the warden's response is immediate and surgical. He invokes the original board order, because here is the cold institutional logic. The order to proceed with the lobotomy was not conditional on Andrew being insane at the moment of execution. It was issued on the grounds of his history of violence and his chronic condition. Cawley's philosophical objections are noted and overridden. Andrew Laeddis is going to the lighthouse, regardless of what Cawley or Sheehan want. The only question now is whether anyone is going to stop it. And the answer to that question, the answer that sets up our alternate climax, hinges entirely on one man, Dr. Sheehan. Here is where our alternate universe produces a scene that Scorsese never shot. And frankly, I want to live in the timeline where he did. Dr. Sheehan does not go quietly. Think about who Sheehan actually is in the context of this story. He came to Ashcliffe as a psychiatrist willing to spend months undercover as an orderly, as a fabricated federal marshal, as Andrew Laeddis' closest friend, all in service of a therapeutic intervention. He is not a bureaucrat. He is a man who took an extraordinary personal risk because he believed in the possibility of Andrew's recovery. And now that recovery has happened, completely, spectacularly, and the institution is going to lobotomize the evidence. Sheehan goes to Andrew's room that night. This is the scene. This is the conversation the original film never needed to have, and it is devastating. Andrew is sitting on his bed. He already knows Sheehan is coming. He knows what Sheehan is going to say. And he listens to all of it. The argument for survival, the argument that his clarity is itself a victory worth preserving, the argument that he could testify, that Ward C could be exposed, that the program could be dismantled, and Andrew hears every word. And then he says something that is completely, canonically, heartbreakingly in character. Chuck, I know what I did. Not as a memory, as a fact. My children's faces are not a nightmare anymore. They're just real. And I have to carry that every hour for the rest of my life, with a full set of working memories, on an island I can never leave. You're asking me to choose that over peace. I've already made my choice. And this is where Sheehan, Dr. Sheehan, the psychiatrist, the professional, makes a decision that breaks every rule he was ever trained under. He helps Andrew escape. Not off the island. That's not possible. There is no ferry, no boat, no realistic route. But off the ward, out of the pathway of the morning's scheduled procedure, into the one part of Ashcliffe where the warden's operational authority has a gap. The records room. The files room. The room full of evidence. Because if Andrew will not save himself for himself, Sheehan is going to make him save himself for something larger. What follows is, and I want to be precise about this because it matters, not an action sequence. This is not a thriller climax of running and shooting and dramatic escapes. Andrew Laeddis is not Teddy Daniels. He doesn't want to fight his way out. He never did. What follows is a documentation sequence. Andrew and Sheehan, in the small hours of the morning, systematically pulling and photographing, in our 1954 setting, copying by hand, every file they can access. Ward C admission records, experiment logs, the correspondence between the facility's administration and unnamed government contacts, the evidence that Teddy Daniels spent 2 days trying to find and kept being blocked from. It is unglamorous. It is exhausting. And it is, scene for scene, the most powerful thing Andrew Laeddis has ever done, because he is doing it with full knowledge that it won't save him. The lobotomy is still coming. The board's order stands. Sheehan cannot legally stop a committed procedure without grounds that will take weeks to establish through the courts. Weeks they don't have. Andrew knows this. He copies the files anyway. Dawn breaks. The Warden's staff finds them in the records room. Andrew is calm. Sheehan is arrested. Professionally, clinically, with the language of psychiatric detention used as a weapon against one of their own doctors. Because that is how Ashcliffe works. That is what it is. Andrew is walked back to his ward, and here is the alternate climax's final image, the one that mirrors and inverts the original film's closing shot. In Scorsese's ending, Andrew walks toward the lighthouse in the morning light, and we watch him from behind, growing smaller until the doors close. In our ending, Andrew Laeddis is in the procedure chair. The anesthetic is being administered, and in the last seconds before it takes hold, Andrew is not looking at the ceiling. He's looking at the window, at the water outside, at the island he arrived on as a fiction and is leaving as himself. And he smiles. Not the smile of a broken man, not the smile of someone surrendering to madness. The smile of a man who, in the last hour of his conscious life, did the one thing his entire psychological architecture was built for. He protected someone. The files are already gone. Sheehan smuggled them out before the staff arrived. Where they go from there, to a journalist, to a federal contact, to a senator's office, our film doesn't tell us. That is not Andrew's story to finish. His story ends here, in the chair, with the water outside the window. Which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man? In our universe, he chose. And for the first time since Dachau, Andrew Laeddis, patient 67, dies as both. So what does this alternate universe actually tell us? Because every good what if isn't just a thought experiment. It's a mirror. It reflects something back about the original story that you couldn't see until you broke it open and looked at the pieces. And what this version of Shutter Island reveals is something that the original film keeps carefully ambiguous. Deliberately so, because Scorsese is too good a filmmaker to tip his hand. It reveals that the most terrifying line in the entire movie is not, "She was never my wife," or "I drowned them," or any of the flashback moments. It's that last, quiet line on the steps. Which would be worse? Because in our alternate universe, that line is not a symptom, it is a conclusion. A piece of moral reasoning from a man in full possession of his faculties. And that makes the original ending retroactively darker. Because now, every time you watch the final scene of Shutter Island, you will not be able to rule out the possibility that Scorsese filmed it exactly the way we've described it. That Andrew is sane, that he knows, that he's choosing, and simply never told us. That the entire film's unreliable narration extends past the ending. That the story refuses to confirm whether we're watching a relapse or a decision. That ambiguity was always there. We just drew a map of what's on the other side of it. Now, here is the question I am leaving in your lap, because it is the one that has genuinely been nagging at me since I started building this theory. If you were Andrew Laeddis, with the full memory intact, with no way off the island, knowing exactly what you'd done, would you choose the lobotomy, or would you choose to carry it? There is no correct answer. The film knows that. Our alternate universe knows that. That's what makes it Scorsese. Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you land on this one. And if you think there's a different point of divergence in Shutter Island that would blow this theory out of the water, tell me, because we will absolutely revisit this island. But hey, that's just a theory. A MiniFlicks Theory. Thanks for watching.